Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and I want to talk about, well, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition compatible material. We're going to talk about a Kickstarter and I have a guest with me today. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
So, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I've been writing since I was a fetus, and I got into role-playing probably almost right away, probably 1988. And I was homebrewing from the get-go. And I started a website in 1996 publishing homebrew stuff. And I decided to go professional in 2006. And my magnum opus, which was called Amethyst, was my frontline. Now, at that point, I was working it for 3rd edition, and then 4th edition got announced. So I made the decision 1 month after my book released to readapt it to 4th edition, which was very controversial, as I was technically the first person to sign on to the game system license for WotC. And that got the attention of Goodman Games, that published Amethyst Foundations in 2010. There was a slight, I don't know if you may have heard, there might have been a slight economic issue that happened around 2008, 2010, which kind of affected the industry. You know, the sourness of 4th edition started to take hold and a lot of people jumped ship. I didn't. I stayed with 4th edition, which I think, well, I know it got the attention of WotC. They appreciated the fact that I was still supporting their languishing system. So I got access to the 5th edition rules before a lot of other people did. I got access to the alpha test, the friends and family playtest. And from there, I was able to adapt Amethyst to 5th edition and get that out before anyone else did. And so I've been always trying to kind of keep up with the means and trying to produce new content. I produced Apex, which is superheroes for 4th edition and 5th edition. I did the first Cyberpunk book, which was Neurospasta for 4th edition and 5th edition. And then I also did the first generic science fiction rule set for 5th edition and 4th edition, which was Ultramodern. So that, and then the last one was when it was successful. I wasn't expecting that to be a success. I released it on the same day I went on vacation and was watching all the sales run through and realized, oh, I actually have something. I might be able to do this full time. It would be another 2 years before I would do that. And then we did a Kickstarter for a relaunch of Ultramodern last year. That blew up a lot better than I expected. So I get to do this full time for the first time in my life.
Oh, now it's interesting that you mentioned the alpha play test for 5th edition, because I was part of the beta public testing for D&D Next, and I got roped into the alpha play test because one of my mates got chummy with Mike Merles, and the next thing I find myself as a guinea pig, and then I'm testing it as well. I'm dungeon mastering for this thing, so I'm actually in the monster manual for Dungeons and Dragons 5e, which is much to my surprise.
Nice.
Yeah. So tell me about the current Kickstarter that you are running.
Well, like I said, I really like pushing the envelope of role-playing games and how we can employ them to tell stories. Amethyst tells a story. Ultramodern is a toolbox to allow other people to tell their stories. And I was inspired to create something that was trying to, I wouldn't say push the envelope per se, but trying to exercise my creativity mechanically as well as within the setting. And so it was inspired by a film called Cloud Atlas. I'm not sure if you've seen that. And also The Fountain. I like the idea of these three to five related timelines populated by the same people, sometimes the same characters, sometimes in the case of Cloud Atlas, same actors. And I was fascinated by the idea, and I thought, could I turn that into a role-playing game? Could I challenge myself to create 3 thematically similar but completely distinct campaign settings that share common names, common titles, but be completely different, but share a common menace and potentially some thematic connections as well. And so that turned into this setting called Affinity, which involves 3 very distinct books as one set, which tells a slightly similar story in 3 different ways.
Core blimey. Okay. All right. So I was going to say what makes this Kickstarter special, but I guess you're talking about almost, it feels like 3 different settings in one.
There are 3 settings and they're split up. So this project is called Affinity. And then the 3 individual projects is Paradise, Taurus, and Conestoga. And one of them is about a 50-50 magic technology mix, One's about 80-20 magic technology, and the other one is about 80-20 sci-fi magic. So each of them has a slightly different mix. One's predominantly science fiction, one's predominantly fantasy, and the other one's a steampunk fantasy that mixes technology and magic into one little setting. But like I said, they share common points. They're all set on manufactured worlds. They all have 12 empires that are battling for control, and they all have about a 2,000-year history that was punctuated recently by when empires collapse. But once again, very distinct settings, because one's a high fantasy, it's got religious allegories. Conestoga's got mecha, and there's salvaging and scavenging and crafting. And then we have steampunk, which is it's steampunk. It's a whole setting entirely in itself.
So when does the Kickstarter begin and end for this project?
The Kickstarter we're hoping to launch in March. We were hoping to launch early in March, but I think it's probably going to be mid to late March, just because we're waiting on some assets to come down. And because my artist is fantastic. I've been using the same artist for the last 15 years. And he's fast, but because I don't rely on anyone else, it takes a bit longer to get all the assets together. So we're hoping for a mid to late March launch, and that'll run for 30 days into April.
So how can people support this Kickstarter if they are interested?
Well, like I said, the Kickstarter page, the draft of the Kickstarter page will probably be going live in a couple of weeks, and it's going to stay in the draft so people can see the campaign, see what the pledge levels are, see what we're offering for the next probably month before we have it go live. And you can choose to get one book. I personally don't think it's a good idea. I think if you want to get the full experience, you want to get all three, and they're available both in black and white and color. This project is going to happen, but the Kickstarter is to fund a much more robust, much more complete full color version in print. If not, there's still a black and white version coming. You can back for the black and white version, which is much cheaper, or jump up to the color or the 3-book set print edition.
So that's quite a lot. So there's quite a few different support levels, I imagine, that will be available to people. What is actually going to be in these books? I mean, I'm assuming we're talking about 3 setting books. So are we looking at new subclasses, feats, races, backgrounds, or equipment?
Okay, so I'm going to go into boast mode. I don't generally do it because I'm very I'm very critical of my own abilities. Each of these books currently is about 220 pages each. So that's about 600 plus pages total. That's pre-artwork. So we're probably looking at about 240, 250 pages each. And depending on our stretch goals, could stretch to 300 pages each. That's about 900 page content. About a half of it currently is fluff, story stuff, narrative, and then explaining the setting. The rest of it is all new mechanics. There's about 160 new monsters split up between the 3 books. There is, I'd say, about 9 to 11 new classes among the 3 books. There's 2 new classes because I create 2 completely new spellcrafting systems. One's based off of talismans, and the second is based off of a deck of playing cards, which means you, as a player, you actually have to use a deck of playing cards as you're playing your character to determine your power level and what you can do. And then we have a psionic system for the 3rd one. And then we have about 100 or so new and weird and oddly enough, kind of goofy magic items. We have, I'd say, a dozen, maybe 2 dozen backgrounds. It's new loot. We have new loot rules because there's new equipment in each one. And I got about 100 steampunk weapons in Taurus and an inscription-based enchantment system. I saw that. I saw a tenant, and I go, that should be a magic gun. There's also, and Conestoga has a crafting system that eats up a good chunk of that book, which is inspired by the game Dead Space. I really like the idea of people slapping modules together and creating unique devices. So I have a crafting system that allows you to make 11,000 different guns. And then we have an armor system that's similar, but not as complicated. It's about 40 power armor with about 150 different upgrades. So you have a couple thousand combinations in that one. So that itself is a huge chunk. So in total, you're talking about 600 some pages or 400 pages just now of just solid crunch. If you don't want the setting, just take the mechanics as it is. I try to make them so they're not setting. I make them so they're not that they're setting agnostic, so you can detach them from the setting if you want to use them in your own game. So yeah, that's the whole full list of mechanical stuff so far. Some of the stretch goals, I want to include new golem rules, new races, add another class, but those are stretch goals that we can hopefully unlock.
Good Lord, Chris, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. It really is. Okay, so give us an example of what you think are, well, your favorite, or the ones that you think are the most unique and people are going to like the most.
Like when I started the project, the original plan was to be 100-page books, 3 of them, and then release them in PDF. And then I kept on getting ideas. I go, oh, wouldn't it be cool to do this? And when I did the construction rules for Conestoga, and I wrote all the rules down, all the tables, and then counted the variations and realized I had 11,000 guns, and the book was 200 pages. I'm like, well, I can't leave these other books at 120. I have to add content. So I went back and added stuff in. The construction system for Conestoga is by far its strongest suit. That's what it's big for. For tourists, the magic system around playing cards was something I wanted to try. I like the idea of learning from some of these novel mechanics in board games and finding a ways to play with board game mechanics and introduce them into 5th edition. I had a die placing mechanic in an ultra modern for one of the classes. And for Paradise, Paradise is much more a traditional fantasy setting. So it has a talisman-based magic system. I really want to dive into the golem rules so that people can make 60, 70 different types of golems. I hate the idea of golems always being humanoids. And when I start looking for official stuff, they're all just, here's a stone golem. Oh, here's some more golems. Here's a humanoid amethyst golem. I'm like, can't I have a golem that's a dog? Yeah, and play with the ideas and maybe even introduce a golem race. So each of them has something that's strong. So if you like hard fantasy or you like science fiction, there's going to be something in there that's going to be useful for you mechanically.
Cool. So whereabouts can people find you right now, or the information on this project if they are interested in finding out more about it?
Well, deusexmachina.com is our website, and it's kind of my handle. So you'll find Deus Ex Machina, which is Deus Ex Machina, but it's my last name, Chris Diaz. So it's DIAS Ex Machina. Not my idea. And you can find me on Twitter under Deus Ex Machina, Facebook under Deus Ex Machina, and my website, which is deusexmachina.com. And you'll see I update on the progress of Affinity almost all the time. And so when the Kickstarter launches, it's going to be posted on those pages.
Great. Oh, thank you for that, Chris. That's fantastic. Is there anything else you would like to add before we finish up?
Well, most people were attracted to Ultramodern because of the mechanics. Like I said, I've been writing for 5th edition since the day it came out. I've been doing mechanical writing for about 25 years. But I love the idea of using role-playing games as a way of telling a story. If you are a writer and you want to tell a story, nothing defines your setting more than making a game out of it, because you have to quantify and specify everything. You won't get pulled into a technical plot hole if you've turned your setting into a role-playing game, because you'll iron out holes within your own work. So I love reading role-playing games as much for what it's trying to say than what it's trying to offer mechanically. And that's one of the things I wanted to test with Affinity, because if you read Affinity for the mechanicals, yeah, you'll get a lot of content, but I think that there's way more value in what it's saying. The idea that if you read it, you'll see these parallel points. Seeing if I mention a name in one book, you'll see that name mentioned somewhere in the other 2 books. So it's a bit of a scavenger hunt. And if you read the narrative, because there's a narrative segment throughout the whole thing, you'll see characters also encounter this strange familiarity. The same characters are in every single story encountering each other in different ways. So there's a narrative value to that as well. So I think hopefully, if it'll not attract the people mechanically, it'll attract people who just like reading role-playing games for their narrative value, because I think they do have that. There is a digital version, both in black and white and color. You can also back for the color version in print, the black and white version not being offered in color. We have a 3-box slipcase edition, which is the highest Kickstarter level. And that gets you 3 books with a slipcase. And many of the stretch goals are for increasing the page count, page quality. The last 2 or 3 stretch goals, if we get to that, allows us to offer the set as a leather-bound set. So it increases the quality significantly. Gilding on the side really just jumps up the quality, so it makes it a real collector's item.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, Chris, for being on and talking about your Kickstarter. Affinity sounds very unique, and I'm sure a lot of people will be really interested in the project.
Well, I hope so too. Otherwise, why am I doing this?
Okay, thank you, Chris. And look, go check out Chris's links. He's told you all of them. I will make sure all of those links are down in the description for this video so you can find them easily. And I will also include the link to the Kickstarter when it finally gets released, and there's a link to actually put down there. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.